Right. Let's just it's very easy daf because a lot of stuff that we did, a lot of the stuff is that we're going to learn today is we did it once before. Anyhow, the Gemara brought a source yesterday from of what is the source that a sukkah has to be 10 tefachim. 10 tefachim has to be at least 10 tefachim. So the answer is that the pasuk says that the wings of the Aron was soichachim. Okay, that's a key word, soichachim, which means they were like schach, covering over the kaporos. That's what the pasuk says. I'll show it to you in a moment. That means that we know from other sources that the head of that kruv, I don't see, you can see a little head over there. That's the head of a little baby, of a child, an infant, not an infant, like a young kid and a young girl. The head was on the 20 tefach mark in the Mishkan. Right above that was the wing. So the wing had an airspace of 10 tefachim. That's the key. So therefore, we have a source that a sukkah has to be 10 tefachim. That's clear. But that only assumes that the Aron itself was 10 tefachim. But we're going to learn that there's an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda who's going to hold that the Aron was only 8.5 tefachim high, because he holds when the pasuk says that the Aron was Amma b'chetzi, and Amma does not have 6 tefachim; it has 5 tefachim. So an Amma and a half a Amma is 7.5 tefachim, plus the lid, the kaporos, was 8.5. So according to him, the Gemara is going to ask, a sukkah has to be 11.5 tefachim, because you have 1.5 more of airspace from the top of the wingspan. That's the Gemara's question, and the Gemara is going to come up with a new solution. Okay, the Gemara is over here. Okay, right over here, very simple. Hanicha, all this makes sense. L'Rav Meir, according to Rav Meir, that the height of the Aron was 10 tefachim. So above the Aron, above the box, till the wing was another 10 tefachim. The Amar, he said, Kol ha'amas ha'yabeininis. All the amas that you measure in the kalim of the Mishkan, the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, was an amma, the middle amma, which was 6 tefachim. Ela Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says the amma shel binyan. When you're building, you use the shisha tefachim. Then you say 6 tefach is an amma, v'shel kalim. But when you're building vessels, so for example the Aron, chamisha, 5 tefach equal an amma. So if the Chumash says that the height of the Aron was 1 amma and a half, that's 5 tefachim plus 2.5, which is 7.5 tefachim, plus 1 amma for the one tefach for the lid, so it's 8.5 tefachim. So according to the air, the Aron was only 8.5 tefachim. So the gap between the wings to the lid was 11.5 tefachim. What are you going to say? Aron v'kaparis kama havala. When you take the Aron and the kaparis, how much do you get? Manya upalga. You got 8.5. Pashaluhu. So you have the gap between the wings, which was on top of the Aron, till the box itself was chad surei upalga, 11.5 tefachim. So Ema, why don't you say sukkah will not be kosher? According to Rabbi Yehuda, a sukkah should not be kosher unless it has 11.5 tefachim. So how does Rabbi Yehuda know that a sukkah is kosher with 10 tefachim? This source is not a good source. So the Gemara says, El Rabbi Yehuda hilchas gemirullah. Rabbi Yehuda had a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that said, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai that said that a partition of a sukkah, a wall of a sukkah, has to be 10 tefachim. It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. No source in the Torah. The Amar Reb Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Reb Chia bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, Shi'urim, the amount of size for each mitzvah in the Torah and prohibition in the Torah, chatzitzin, what is a interposition? And that means an interruption between your body and the mikvah. That's we'll discuss that in a moment. Umechitzen, mechitzen is the height of a wall, or right, the height of a wall, that it has to be 10 tefachim. All these things are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Are halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and therefore there is no source in the Chumash. So the Gemara analyzes now, what do you mean shi'urim? The shi'ur of everything in the Torah, every mitzvah in the Torah, kazayis, saora, is halacha l'Moshe Messina. It's not written in the Torah. So Gemara says shiurin deraisen hinu. Shiurin is written in the Torah. The ksiv. Where does it say all the shears in the Torah? The measurements. The ksiv. The Torah says that Eretz Yisrael, and it's good we talked about Eretz Yisrael, going to Eretz Yisrael. Torah says lo sechsa kol boy. Nothing is missing in Eretz Yisrael. From climate to produce, nothing is missing in Eretz Yisrael. Then the Chumash lists off. You know what Eretz Yisrael has special? Eretz, it's a land of chita, wheat, so'ora, barley. Geffen, it has vineyards, grapes. Seina has figs. Rimoin is pomegranates. Eretz Zeh, shemen, it has olives that give off a lot of oil. Udvash, it means it's a land of sweetness, a land of dates. So it describes the nice parts of Eretz Yisrael, the nice produce of Eretz Yisrael. Well, really, you get this produce anywhere in the world. So what makes Eretz Yisrael unique about listing off these produce? So v'omer Rab Chanan said that kol ha-pasuk hazeh l'shiurim. All the pasuk is teaching you that if you look at the fruit of Eretz Yisrael, you don't just see a fruit, you see a halacha from it, a shiur. For example, Nema, the Torah says chita, a wheat. Well, what's the halacha of wheat that has to do with Eretz Yisrael, and that has to do with halachas? Because the bayis hamanuga, a house that has a blemish on it. In the ancient times, it was possible that a house could have leprosy, so to speak. And anybody who comes into that house becomes tamei. Now, it depends how long you stay in the house. Because if you walk into the house by yourself, you become tamei right away. But if you're, so we'll listen to the Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the Tanan. Hanichnas l'bayis hamanuga, a man that goes into a house that has a nega on the wall. So the Caleb al Ksefam, and he's carrying, let's say, his jacket on his shoulders, or he's carrying his sweater in his hand. The sandoilov, his shoes, the taba'oisav, or his rings biyada. He's not wearing it, so to speak. And in the ancient times, the men used to wear rings. So if he's wearing ancient time, but that's what it was. You see it from the Mishnah. They wore rings. So if he's carrying that, hu v'hein tameim yad. Right away, as soon as you walk in, you don't have to spend any time in there. You become tamei right away. We go to Daf Vav Amud Aleph. But hoyel lavish, if you're wearing Caleb, let's say you're wearing your suit jacket, the sandal of your shoes, baragla, the taboisa betzbois, and you're wearing your ring on your finger, then you have to wait. In order for those items of clothing that you're wearing to become tamei, you have to wait. We'll say that you have to be in the house for 2 minutes. How do you know 2 minutes? The Chumash says that in order for your clothing to become tamei, you have to have stayed in this house, the shear, to eat something. To eat what? To eat achilas pras, a half a loaf of bread, which each loaf has, let's say, 8 eggs. So you have to eat the shear to eat 4 eggs, which we're familiar with this on matzah. It's about the shear of what it takes to eat wheat, a bread made out of wheat for 2-3 minutes. So that's what it says. If you're wearing all this clothing and you're wearing the rings on your finger, so then hu tamei biyad, your body is tamei right away. Vehein tahorim, they remain pure until you stay in that house b'chdei achilas pras, enough time to eat a half a loaf of bread. That is the food of one meal. What is the loaf made out of? Pas chitin, it has to be a wheat bread, v'loy pas soyer, not a barley bread. It's easier to eat a wheat bread and not a barley bread. Mesev, it has to be that you're eating it leaning, because leaning, you eat faster because you're focused on your leaning. When you're leaning, Rashi says you're focused on your eating. And you can eat that bread with a little spread on it, so you swallow it easier. So from there, basically, I don't know, I think the time is 3 minutes. Okay, let's call it 3 minutes. But so when the Torah said chita, that Eretz Yisrael has wheat, so it reminds you that in order for your begadim to become tamei, because you delayed staying in a house that has an egg in it, you have to eat. It has to be the time period that you can eat a half a loaf of wheat bread, leaning and eating it with spread. So chita reminds you of that halacha. What does Sa'ira remind you? When the Torah says that Eretz Yisrael has barley, what does that remind you of? So this we had before. It reminds you of another din. The Tanah we learned in the Mishnah. etzem bones. Bones, as we know, are very much alive. So a bone of a human being is metame you for 7 days, not ba'oil, not in the tent. That you have to have the most of the body of the person or the spine of the person. Just the spine of a person could be metame ba'oil. And what else can be metame ba'oil? I think the skull also could be metame ba'oil, or roiv binyan, or if you have most of the bones or most of the build of the body, which is the thigh bone and the femur bone. But if you just have a little bone of let's say a nothing of a bone, it's the size of a barley. Metama b'maga b'masa. If you touch it, you become tamei tumas mace just by touching it, by carrying it. The aina metama ba'oil, and it doesn't be metama you with if you put it in a house. Okay, so Sa'ira reminds you of the din of becoming tamei of with the dead bone. What does Geffen remind you of? Kidei revius yayin lenozir. What does that mean? What that means is that it reminds you of, a nazir is not allowed to eat the pits. Let's say the pits of grapes. Not only he can't drink wine, not only can't eat grapes, but he also cannot eat the pits. So how much pits can't he eat? The pits that he can't eat is a revius of pits. Well, revius is normally a liquid measurement. So what you do is you take enough pits, you put it into wine, and the amount of pits that displace a revius yayin in a cup, that's the amount of pits that a nazir is not allowed to eat. Now, not a revius water, because water leaves a cup a lot faster than wine. Wine, piles up at the rim. So you need a little bit more pits. So basically, Geffen reminds you of how much of the halacha of how to determine how much pits a nazir has to eat to violate his naziris. Te'ena, what does a fig remind you of? Well, that reminds you of how much of a food, you're not allowed to carry food on Shabbos. So how much of a food is considered carrying? A popcorn? No, it has to be the size of a fig. A fig will remind you of the shiur of carrying on Shabbos. What does remind you? Pomegranate. The Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, call clay balibat and shiurim can remind him. Every keli, every vessel could become tummy, right? Become tummy. But a keli could be called a broken keli, and it's no more susceptible to tuma only if it has a hole the size of a pomegranate, and the owner is a regular plain person. So a balabas, a regular person, keeps kalim that are broken, even if they have a small hole in it, he'll still think it's functional. But if it has the size of a rimoin, the hole in the keli is the size of a pomegranate, he'll throw the whole keli out. Eretz, so therefore, that's what Rima reminds you. The halacha of taharas kalim. Eretz shemen, olive oil, simple. Eretz shekol shiureh kazesim. All the shears that you have, halacha of nevela, chazer, dam, any halacha of the prohibition of not eating something, the shear is, all the shiurim of the Torah have to do with zayis. Frag the Gemara, kol shiureh sakadaitich, is every shear in olive? No, we just talked about barley shear. We talked about the fig shear. Most shiurim in the Torah have to do with the size of an olive. So olives reminds you of the other prohibitions in the Torah. Devash, honey, which means something sweet. Basically, devash doesn't mean honey, it means sweet. Should remind you of keseves hagasa b'Yom Kippur, like the sweet, thick date on Yom Kippur with the pit. As we learned that on Yom Kippur, to violate not eating on Yom Kippur, you have to eat more than a kezayis. It has to be like a date. So here's the conclusion of this entire question. You just told me that what? That shiurim that are halacha l'maishem Sinai, alma, but I just told you that it's really a source in the Torah. So how can you tell me it's a tradition? It's not written in the Torah. So this question, this whole omid of a question seems so obvious of an answer. The Tizbra, do you make sense? Shiura miksivi, does it really say the shiur? It just says geffen, let's say, and you have to interpret it means revius. It just says te'ena, and you have to say it's dried fig. And it says you have to apply it. So it doesn't really say it in the Torah. It just talks about the great Paris, the great produce of Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't really specify the shiurim. Ella, what is this pasuk all about? Hilkasaninu. Really, it's halacha Moshe Sinai. Ukra asmachta ba'alma, and the pasuk is just a way to remember it. It's like a remembering tool, a peg to remember all the shiurim in the Torah. Memorize that pasuk. But really, the halachas of shiurim, what constitutes a size of a dairaisa, that is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So that was the first thing that we learned, that halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Who said it? This was said by Reb Chia bar Ashi Amar Rab. That was the first thing. Shiurim is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The next thing he said, chatzitzin, interruptions. If you go to a mikveh, you're not allowed to have something that blocks the water from getting to your body. So the Gemara says, chatzitzin, something to block the water from getting to your body, deraisininu. That's a prohibition of the Torah. The Ksiv pasuk says, v'rochatz es b'sorei b'mayim. You have to wash your entire body in water in the mikveh. That implies that it should not be interposition between you and the water. The entire body should go into the water. So the answer is ki asay hilkasa lisa'orai. The first attempt is that the halacha l'Moshe Sinai was to tell you that you have to have all your hair on your head go into the water. And not only they should go into the mikveh as well, but if there is a chatzitza on your hair, a chatzitza interposition on your hair, that's also that blocks you from your tahara. The Rabbi Bachana gave halachas. The Amar Rabbi Bachana talked about hair. Nima achas kashu. If you have like a slip knot in one hair, a woman who has, let's say, one hair that has a slip knot, that means chaytzetzes. There's a chatzitza because water can't get throughout the hair because it's knotted. So it's a chatzitza. Shalosh, if she has a knot by bringing together three hairs, then ain't a chetzetzes. That wouldn't constitute a chatzitza because it's a loose and the water can get through to the space. Shtayim, but if you tie two hairs together, ain't a dayan. I don't know if it's a chatzitza or not. But the bottom line is that you see that you have to toivel the hair in the mikvah, and that is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Because without the chumash, I would think just your body has to go into the water. How do I know your hair has to go into the water? That's what the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says, that your hair also has to go into the water, and chatzitza and your hair applies as well. That's what chatzitza means. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? I have no source in the Torah that you have to go to the mikvah with your hair. That means the woman has to go totally under the water with her hair. Sorry, nami do raisik ninu. It's a source in the Torah that says the ksiv rochat says besore by mine. Es besore. Es hatafel besore. The es tells you something that is connected, less important than the body, but that also requires the mikvah. Umanihu, what is that? So all right. So from the es, I know that here has to go into the mikvah. So again, what does the halacha l'Moshe Sinai teach us in regards to the halacha of mikvah? So the answer is, the Gemara gives the final attempt. He also, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai comes to teach you Rabbi Yitzchak, what Rabbi Yitzchak taught. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, this has to do with the inyan of chatzitza. In other words, a chatzitza, I would have thought, just from the Torah itself, that in order for something to be interposition, you have to have your entire body covered with a chatzitza. Your entire body is in a cast. That's a chatzitza. That's without the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. But the halacha l'Moshe Sinai tells you, let's give the example of hair. We know that you have to be toivel your hair. So I would have thought without the halacha l'Moshe Sinai that the only time you have a chatzitza in the mikveh with your hair is if you're wearing a bathing cap. Your entire hair is covered, then and that's a chatzitza. But if most of your hair if part of your hair is not covered, that wouldn't constitute a chatzitza. Comes along Devar HaTorah. This word Devar HaTorah means the halacha l'Moshe Sinai teaches you that rubai umakbid. If you're covering most of your hair and it bothers you, in other words, you're concerned about it, you don't want it there, then chaytzitz, that constitutes a chatzitza. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Let's say it's covering most of your hair, but you're not so concerned about it. You know, it's something that doesn't bother you. Then ein chaytzitz. It wouldn't be constituted a chatzitza. Oh, that's and huadin. That's if you're not makbid, or if it's on a mute, means midaraitza. If it's only on part of your hair, but most of your hair has no chatzitza, even if you're makbid on it, it wouldn't constitute a chatzitza. So that's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That ends. Really, the Gemara could stop over here. But the Gemara just talks about the halachas of going to the mikvah. The Gazru al rubai sheina makbid b'shum rubai hamakbid. Chazal said that even if you have most of your hair covered, and you're not makbid with the chatzitza, you don't care about that interposition. It just, you have a chatzitza, let's say a band, like a covering of most of your head, that's constituted a chatzitza midrabanan. Because mishum rubai hamakbid, because you could confuse it with rubai hamakbid, with covering most of the body, and you're concerned about it. With that is also min hatara, also halacha l'mayshim sinai. And Chazal also said, if you have a little bit of your hair covered, but you're concerned about it, that's also chatzitza midrabanan, mishum rubai hamakbid, because you're geyser, because of rubai hamakbid, if it's most of your body, and you're makbid on it, then you're concerned about it. That's even the halacha l'mishum sinai. So if you have one thing going for you, either it's roiv, it's covering most of your body, or even if it's not covering most of your body, it bothers you that it's there, like a bandage or something like that, or you're going to remove it. Therefore, that is considered a chatzitza. So the Gemara says like this. The Gemara says, let's be geyser. If you're making drabbanans, why did the Rabbanan say that any type of thing on your body should passel you? If you have like a little ink mark, that should passel your whole mikvah. They should make a gzera that if you have a small amount and you're not concerned about it, that should be also invalidate your mikvah. Because of the Rabbanan, it could lead to Rabbanan of miut hamakbid. Or it could confuse you and say that even if it just has one thing wrong with it, if it has both things wrong with it, you may think that that something that just has one thing wrong with it is also not a problem, and that's asimad Rabbanan. So the Gemara says the simple, you don't go too far. He gifa gzera. The fact of rubai she'ein makbid or miyat hamakbid is only a gzera d'Rabbanan. So we don't make banan nekem migza gzera l'gzera. We don't make gzeras to a gzera. If the whole thing is a Rabbanan, we don't make a gzera. Maybe you'll come over a Rabbanan. A gzera is something that you protect yourself from being over a doraisa. But once something is also midrabanan, you don't make another gezerah on top of that to prevent you from being over this rabbanan. So the Gemara just concludes this Gemara. Mechitzen hada'amrin. So now that you told me what that mechitzen is, I understand fully that is. So now comes the final thing. Mechitzen hada'amrin. The mechitza is also halacha l'mayshim sinai. That means that a mechitza has to be 10 tefachim. That is halacha l'mayshim sinai. That's one of the things we said. So hanichel Rabbi Yehuda. That very well according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda had no source in the Torah that a mechitza has to be 10 tefachim. Elul Rav Meir had a source in the Torah that a mechitza has to be 10 tefachim from the Aron, right? That was Rav Meir's source. So what does he need? The halacha l'mayshim sinai to teach you any halachas regarding walls, regarding mechitzas. Ma'ikal meimar. So the answer is even Rav Meir needs a halacha l'mayshim sinai regarding walls, which we'll learn a lot about that in this Masechta. Ki asoi hilkas the halacha l'mayshim sinai will teach you lagoid to do good achis. Sometimes you have to extend the wall downward. Sometimes you extend the wall upward. Beloved. Sometimes you connect a wall or the schach to the wall, the doifen akuma, or the crooked wall. The crooked wall was that if you have less than 4 amas of bad schach next to the wall, you could actually sit under the bad schach. You can actually sit under the bad schach because that becomes as if you're sitting in the shade of a wall. You're sitting in a kosher sukkah, even though you're directly under a bad schach, because doifen akuma, we imagine that the wall just curved a little bit, and therefore it's still a kosher sukkah. So that was the halacha l'mayshim sinai, according to Rav Meir, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha l'mayshim sinai tells you one more din that it has to be 10 tefachim. So ends the sugya. I think we had this once before, maybe in Erevin, that there are 3 main halacha l'mayshim sinai: shiurin, and then chatzitza in a mikvah, what a ruba hamakbid, that is the halacha l'mayshim sinai, and the halacha of mechitza, the halacha of walls. Okay, back into the Gemara, and this will be the final Gemara we're doing today. V'she'ein la shalosh tefanos. We learned in our Mishnah that if it doesn't have 3 walls, then it's not kosher. So it needs a minimum. A sukkah needs a minimum of 3 walls to be kosher. Taner Rabbanim. Shtayim kihil chasan. You need to have 2 normal walls. Ushlishis afil tefach, and the third one could be even a tefach. So this is the picture. 2 walls near each other. By the way, it has to be near each other. Pashtus. And then the third wall, according to the Tanakama, could be just the size of a tefach. That is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You don't have to have a complete wall. Now, that's the opinion of the Tanakama. Rav Shimon shalish kil chasan urvius afilu tefach. Rav Shimon says that the 3 have to be. You have to have 4 walls for a sukkah. 3 have to be normal walls. Only the 4th wall could be a tefach. So the Gemara wants to understand. B'mai kami palgi. What is the argument concerning? Why does one hold you need 3 walls? And Rav Shimon holds you need 4 walls. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan Savra Yesh Aim L'Mosaris. Rabbanan hold you give more power to the way something is spelled. The words you'll remember that Mosaris means like samach, spelled. The way something is spelled in the Chumash, that takes more precedence. But Rav Shimon Savra Yesh Aim L'Mikra. What's more powerful in the way you're learning Chumash is how it's vocalized. Okay, kuf means vocalize. What does that mean? Well, what are we talking about here? Look at the pasuk. Rabbanan Savri Yesh Aim L'Masoras. Look at the way something is spelled. It says 3 times in the Chumash Sukkos. Basukas Teishvu Shivas Yomim. Kol HaEzrach BeYisrael Yesh Basukais. By Sukkos Hayshafti B'nei Yisrael. 3 times it says the word Sukkos. But notice how it's spelled. The first 2 times it's spelled without a vav, and the third time it's spelled with a vav. So when it's spelled with a vav, it's the number 2. But when it's spelled without a vav, it's the number 1. So according to the way the Rabbanan learn, the Chumash is hinting to 4 walls. Harei kan arba. You should have 4 walls. But dal chag legufe. 1 you can knock away because that just tells you the name of the holiday and what you should do. So that is it's necessary to say it, so it's not extra. It's just part of the narrative. So what do you have? Pashaluhu tlasu. You have left 3 walls. So the Chumash says you're supposed to have 3 walls. So min haTorah, you're supposed to have 3 complete walls. But there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that a tefach is good enough. So that's why the Rabbanan say shtayim kil chasun. You have 2 normal walls. Ba'asan Hilchah said the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says ugrase l'shlishus and minimizes the 3rd wall. Ba'oikma atefach and puts it that it should be the size of a tefach. That is the opinion of the Chachamim who hold yesh aim le'mesoris. You always give power to the way something is spelled. Rav Shimon Sava yesh aim le'mikra. You always give power to the way it's vocalized. I don't look the way it's spelled. So we consider it the way it's vocalized. It's plural. Basukais, basukais, basukais. So you have each one of them teaches you 2 walls because basukais is a plural word. So it's 2, 2, and 2. So really you should have 6 walls. Harei kan sheish. So dal chad kra legufe. 1 you knock away because that is part of the narrative that tells you that about sukkahs. So you take away 2 of the walls because 1 sukkah you need it for the narrative. So what are you left with? Pashalu arba. You have 4 walls. So you should really have 4 walls in a sukkah. So that's why the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says you should have 3 walls, but the 4th wall could be a tefach. Sholosh kil chasan. Asin sholosh kil chasan 3 according to the halacha. Asin hilchasa grasa l'revius v'oik masa techa. And the 3rd halacha l'Moshe Sinai tells you that the 4th wall could be a tefach. So that is a very fundamental machlokes that appears many times in Shas. When the Chumash spells something differently, the way it's vocalized, how do you view the pasuk? The way it's spelled or the way it's vocalized? And that is the machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanim. Now that's one version. The Gemara is going to give you 1, 2, 3 more ways, 4 more ways to learn the machlokes. All right, let's give it a shot. The Ibai is saying, if you want, I can tell you the machlokes between Rab Shimon and Rabbanim is the kuliyam. Everybody agrees. Yesh aim lemikra. You give power to the way something is vocalized. So what is the machlokes? One, according to this is what the argument is about. Mar sava schacha boya kra. One holds that the fact that that one extra one you need to teach you that you need schach, and therefore we said one legufe, so that takes away two. So because the Yeshem the Mikra tells you that there's the way it's vocalized, there are 6 walls. So you take away one basukkah is to teach you about the mitzvah of sukkah. But now so you're left with 4 times the word sukkah, so to speak. So 1 teaches you schach, and 3 are for the walls. That's what the Rabbanan hold. Omar Sava schacha loy ba'ikra. The one holds that to teach you that you have to have schach, I don't need a pasuk. I could learn it from the original when the first one that you knocked away, lugufe, to teach you the narrative. That's enough to teach me that a sukkah needs schach. That's another way to interpret the machlokes. That everybody holds yesh ein a mikra. The most power is the way something is mikra vocalized. I cannot tell you that the machlokes, the kuliyama, both Rav Shimon and Rabbanan agreed. Yesh ein l'mesaris. The power is the way things is spelled. So the way it's spelled, it should have 4. The Rabbanan hold the halach l'mayshim Sinai. So you knocked away 1, right? So one wall you knocked away legufe. So you have what you left is with 3 walls. And the halacha l'mayshim Sinai said that the 3rd wall should be minimized in tefach. Umar Sova, but Rav Shimon holds ki asa hilkasa lohoisiv. The halacha l'mayshim Sinai didn't minimize. The halacha l'mayshim Sinai said that the Chumash says you need 3 walls. I'm going to tell you that halacha l'mayshim Sinai says you need a 4th wall, albeit the 4th wall needs to be a tefach. So what did the halacha l'mayshim Sinai do? Did the halacha l'mayshim Sinai tell you a wall that the Chumash said is minimum, it could be a tefach, or the halacha l'mayshim Sinai says the way Rav Shimon learned is that all the halacha l'mayshim Sinai did was something more. Not only does the Chumash say you need 3 walls, but the halacha l'mayshim Sinai says you need a 4th wall, and to moisef another 4th wall, but albeit that 4th wall should be at least a tefach. Another way to learn the machlokes is by saying to kuli alma. Everybody holds ki asa hilkas ligroya. Everybody holds that the halacha l'mayshim Sinai is coming to minimize a wall, coming to say that the one wall that the Chumash said could be a tefach. The Yeshem and we always look at the way things are spelled, and therefore the Chumash actually only says that you need 3 walls. So what's the machlokes between Rav Shimon? Why would Rav Shimon say you need a 4th wall? What about the one that you knocked off to teach you the narrative about sukkah that you said you don't need it? Marsova, Rav Shimon holds darshan tchilas. Where you darshan the first sukkah, you don't just throw it out the wall. That teaches you the first wall, even though it's teaching you the whole narrative about sukkah, but you could still use it as it teaching you one wall. Marsova, but the Rabban hold ain darshan tchilas. The first sukkah that you knocked away, right? The first word sukkah that you knocked away, that doesn't teach you any walls. That just teaches you the narrative that the holiday is called sukkahs. So what's left is basukkahs plural and basukkah 1, which teaches you 3 walls, and then halacha l'mayshim Sinai tells you that the 3rd wall could be a tefach. One more opinion, and that's it. Rav Matana Omar. Rav Matana said, Tami the Rav Shimon. What is the reason Rav Shimon that holds that you need a 4th wall on sukkah? So he learns it from a piece of Navi that talks about the future. The sukkah tia, you're going to need a sukkah, letzel yoimam, to shade you during the day, mechoyer, from the heat, ulamachse, to protect you from above, ulamister, to hide you, mizerem, from the stormy winds, umimota, from the rains. So if you look at that pasuk, you have choyrev, and you have that the 4 things that you need a sukkah for: shade, choyrev is heat, 1 sail, zerem is the stormy winds, umimota, from rain. So from this pasuk, he learned that a sukkah has to have 4 walls, because if it's open from 1 wall, the stormy winds of stormy rains could enter into the sukkah. So from here is the source that Rav Shimon required you 4 walls of the sukkah, albeit the 4th wall, the halacha l'mayshim says, could be a tefach. But remember this, Chachamim hold that like this, that all you need is 2 walls, and the 3rd wall could be a tefach. That's it. Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
B'Shem tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Good enough.